Hey everybody, the War Over Reality, Part 2. I want to get right to it, try to be as brief as I can. But as I said in my last podcast, we're living in bizarro world. There's a lot of competing ideas and competing philosophy, competing ideology, and everything is packaged in a very, very well-crafted narrative that if you're not discerning and kind of figuring out what's going on, that we're in a war, and the war is over who will define reality. Simple. And there's a biblical backdrop for this, and we'll get into that briefly. But I I want to dig into this in as briefly, succinctly as I can. But I want to challenge you to look at some deeper realities in everything you hear. You cannot turn your phone on and not start seeing doom scrolling trying to tell you what to believe. And that's why I like forget the hot takes. Y'all need to chill out because the whole world's going to end because Trump said something or Candace Owens said something or Tucker Carlson or whatever the joke of the day. But people, the somebody said something narrative is everywhere. And we've been told the world's going to end the whole year that Trump's been president, and it hadn't ended yet. But uh, he's not perfect. But I'm telling you what, I'm just amazed at some of the narrative that's coming from the legacy news, legacy media, and it's all one-sided. And I never hated Biden. I never hated Obama. I never hated any politician. I hate ideological things. I hate lies. And and when I look at legacy media, all I see is twisting of the truth and lies, and they're very masterful at producing and telling stories. I read a book back in 2012 by Jonas Sachs. He wrote a book called Winning the Story Wars. Very interesting book. An Anglican priest, a friend of mine, told me about that book and said how fascinating it was to read. And after reading the book, I realized that Jonas Sachs and I are not on the same. We don't operate in the same political worldview. But I've learned something. Read books from that are written by people you don't agree with. That's what we really ought to do. We ought to invest in the perspective of other people. A friend of mine told me that years ago. He said, Gary, you have a visceral reaction to things that you just immediately don't agree with. And he says, I want to challenge you to start investing in the perspective of people who don't think like you. And man, it has served me well. I read books from people that I don't agree with, rather than just saying you're wrong because you're not like me. I like to read and find out what their ideas are and explore their weaknesses and then look in the mirror and explore my own weaknesses because we've all got them. But we're living in a world where if you can't learn to do that, crash test everything. As Crash Test Uncle, that's the whole reason for this channel. We crash test worldviews, we crash test ideas, ideologies, and Lord, we're in a war right now over reality, over who will determine reality. And my personal belief is this is not a political war, although it's couched in the narrative tells you it's political. It's a spiritual war because we're dealing with stuff a lot deeper than just I'm Democrat and I'm Republican. This is so much deeper than that. And it's important for us to understand that. But in that book, Winning the Story Wars, uh, I really appreciated because my vantage point at that time, I was running a company, an aviation company, and I thought about for advertisement. He was like, people want to be empowered. A lot of the advertising back in those days was well, you're broken and this product will fix you. If you take this, it'll make you feel better. You're broken. Uh, this will heal you. And it was all kind of shame based a little bit. And he called that out and said, look, you need to empower people. Call people, let them be the hero in the story. And if you're the storyteller, be a mentor, be a truth teller, but let the listener, let the reader be the hero. Let them discover and be empowered by the story. And and now, guys, you turn on your phone, and I see it every day. I'll start, something will grab me, and I'll read a compelling story, a tear-jerking story. It'll make you cry, and you're like, oh my goodness, and then before I know it, I go, oh my goodness, there's like 1,000 words here, and at the end of it, there's a product. That's what I'm talking about. And if you haven't figured it out, all those stories are written by AI, and they're written for one purpose, to grab your emotions. Because one of the things that Jonas Sachs pointed out in his book, Winning the Story Wars, is that people are moved by feeling more than they are by data. A story will move people to adopt a viewpoint or an opinion about a product, or even politically, because he talked about politics in the book, and that was where I differed with him. He is very anti Glenn Beck, and I don't agree with Glenn on everything, but the guy's pretty solid politically on conservatism. But he was part of the movement that drafted stories to kind of uh, throw shade on Glenn Beck, and he was kind of proud of that in the book of how all the misinformation from Glenn Beck. And so I didn't agree with him on that, but the guy knows what he's doing. And like I said in one of my previous podcasts, these people aren't stupid. People who are engineering these stories, trying to control what you think or trying to influence what you think, they're not stupid. They know what they're doing. And all I'm saying is we have to learn to question everything. You know, we have, let me see if I can read. I got to lift my glasses to read. There's something wrong with that. But, you know, in his book, he talks about the audience as the hero, the communicator's the guide. Empowerment beats shame every time. So you empower people, you let them be part of the story. And truth must be lived, not spoken. And he hits on something about hypocrisy. You've got to really, really believe the story you're telling. And every who hasn't been affected by the hypocrisy of someone who tells you they believe a certain way and then they fail to live up to it. And who hasn't lived up to the truth that you've spoken? I'm guilty of that, and most of us are. But he's right about consistency and philosophical stuff. And he wrote another book, I think it was 2018, called Unsafe Thinking, and I really identify with this one. Um, I've been accused of that. Uh, he's, you know, in organizations particularly, and he talks a lot about corporate organizations, advertising, but success creates blind spots. And institutions always drift towards conformity. And so we're not talking about politics at this point. If you're in an institution, it's in a drift, and the bigger it is, the more, well, maybe the slower it is, there's always a drift towards conformity. You're going to conform to that system, and innovation uh, always requires psychological safety. So for people to be innovative, iterative in their thinking, and correcting things in iterations in a corporation, and I got this from being, I'm a certified, I'm certified. My therapist said I'm certifiable, but uh, no, I'm a certified professional scrum master, and that's one of the things that we studied in that certification course. It's very enlightening that you correct things in iterations, just small corrections, and testing and doing that. And you know, to do that, you're questioning the reality of the construct. And this is dealing with mainly with programmers for apps and programming in systems. But it requires psychological safety to be an innovator. You think about that. And uh, questions always question the assumptions behind the system. And reality is the ultimate crash test. That's added by me, because he's in encouraging people to think critically, and that's what I love about Jonah Sachs and the books he writes. He's really calling people to be critical thinkers, and I like that. Doesn't matter if we agree on everything politically. I think he's making a very good point. And I've been in companies where I was an unsafe thinker, and I did not go along with the narrative. I worked for a huge corporation that was a family-run, beautiful culture, some of the best people I've ever worked with in my life, and then a venture capital firm bought it, and it would be like moving from Longview, Texas to Siberia under a communist rule. The difference was just unbelievable. And I've always been honest, or tried to be, and I got myself in a real pickle because I stood up and I challenged some of the norms. I mean, I'm not going to be forced to get a vaccine. Number one thing, and they backed off from that pretty quickly. But I was like, I'm not going to be told what I'm going to do with my personal life. I'm too American to be sucked into this stupid narrative, and that we are now learning was an absolute lie. Most of what we were told, and people who study it, and really, there's a lot of stuff coming out now that the media completely not ignores. That's why I say sign up for Jeff Childers' newsletter, Coffee and COVID. Just look for him on Substack and read that every day. It's valuable information because he digs into a lot of studies, peer-reviewed studies, and a lot of things that you don't even know exist, because the war over reality is what they don't say is very important as well, because you're being guided, you're being pushed. And I talked about that, like with our app, with our company that I drive for. They're guiding you, they're pushing you in a certain direction to do into conformity of their way of doing things, and it always involves you making less money than you should. And I'm very, very cognizant of that, and I call it technocratic determinism, because everybody's a technocrat trying to uh, build algorithms that push you where the company wants you to go. And your feed on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, it is exactly based on an algorithm, because they know what you want, they know what you believe, and you're the guinea pig, and it's all designed to control how you think and what choices you're going to make. It's a determinism, not just influence, but it's really trying to push you into a mindset, and and I believe some of it is so insidious. It's pushing it's pushing communism, it's pushing Marxism, it's pushing hatred. I mean, it's not a mistake that if you are a conservative Republican, let's say, and you open up your feed, it's going to show you a video of the most idiotic left wing idiot progressive saying something verifiably stupid, where most liberals would go, that's not right. But it wants you to hate all liberals, all people who don't think like you. And if you're a liberal and you open it up, it's going to show some redneck person saying something just completely stupid. And the algorithm is trying to divide us and make us hate each other. I believe I mentioned that before. But it's very important in the story wars that we're fighting in right now that we understand that we have to think independently. And I ran into this institutionally. I've run into it with corporations, like I said, and also in a church situation. I was a technical person in a church, and I still love this church. I'm not going to name the church or talk bad about. I don't want to say anything negative, but this experience was very negative because I, as a sound engineer, I'm not the best in the world. I don't think I'm better than anybody else, but I know I know a little bit about mixing sound, particularly in a difficult room, and this was is one of the most difficult rooms in East Texas to mix audio in. And I they brought in a pastor who had a PhD, who has a PhD, highly educated musician, very musical, very good at what he did, but he doesn't know a lick about audio. And there was just a tension there to begin with because he would ask me to do things that were not even humanly possible. And anybody that knew anything about audio would know that what he was asking for could not be accomplished humanly. And I told him one time, I said, dude, I'm a great sound man. I'm a great audio engineer. I really am. But I cannot bend the laws of physics for you. And it pissed him off, he eventually just made such a mess out of things that I walked away, quietly walked away and let it implode and fall in on itself, which it did. And I don't celebrate that fact, but guys, this is me. This is my life. It cost me money to make decisions, and it cost me money to be truthful with people. It cost me a paycheck, and I don't regret that. It's been painful, but I'll tell you something, guys. What we need in this world today is people who that are not hostile, mean, but people that are truthful, that'll stand up and say, "This is not right. I don't want to be forced. I don't want lies forced on me or counter narratives." And people who are in control and ask for conformity are also the kind of people in many cases that they'll crush you to get you to conform. And if you don't conform, you have a choice. You can conform or you can leave. And I've walked away from a couple of situations like that. So be it. You know, I'll work with anybody, and people who know me and have worked with me understand that I will. But I just I don't play games. I've learned that there's a lot of false narratives floating around out there, and I'm not one to just go along with it. And guys, the spiritual element of this is what is really the most important. And I know some of you that watch this are not Christians, and that's okay. I want you to be a Christian. I want you to understand this. But you go back to the book of Genesis, look at Genesis chapter 3. And God had created this garden that was perfect. Everything was good. And he had Adam and Eve. And out of Adam's side, he he created Eve. And they were walking in the garden in innocence in the presence of God. It's a great, beautiful narrative of God providing for his creation, God creating and providing for them. And then chapter 3 comes in Genesis. And the serpent was more crafty than any other creature. And the serpent happened to be a talking serpent. And he comes up to Eve and goes, "Hey, did God really say this?" And he began to question God. And guys, the root of every narrative that is hitting your children and your grandchildren right now is questioning God. Who is God? And guys, this is serious. It really is serious because we're no longer, uh, uh, if we ever were, we're not a Christian nation. we were built on Judeo-Christian values, and the whole basis of our law is based on the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments. And I mean, you see, if you go to the U.S. Supreme Court building, there's an inscription of Moses with the Ten Commandments. But there are forces that want to take over that law and eradicate anything that has to do with Judeo-Christian values. And we're living in that war. And I hope we'll stand up and say something about it. And that's why that I cannot vote for people who are against that. I've made my diatribe about James Tallarico, because imagine, how do you twist reality so much that you would tell a child who's struggling with gender dysphoria, which used to be a form of mental illness according to the Psychological Association, uh, but now it's celebrated as like you're a special class of people, and now we're going to change the language. It's gender affirming care, and I mean there is millions and millions of dollars flowing in to get this guy into the Senate in the state of Texas. And guys, if we're so stupid as to elect people like that, uh, you can kiss America goodbye. You really can. And that's not a political statement. That's just a true statement. I spent time in the Soviet Union, and I debated communists, students in universities, in a couple of universities in Russia. And guys, I found those Soviet communist students to be more reasonable than any Democrat I've ever had to tried to have a conversation with, particularly a progressive Democrat. I'm not putting all Democrats in that boat, because that the left wing that have hijacked and taken over the Democrat Party. I'm a little bit amused that there are very few Democrats in that party. John Fetterman is one, and used to be Manchin, but there aren't very many that have the cojones to stand up and go, no, this is a little bit too bat soup crazy for us. Let's get back to, getting letting people have jobs and work on the economy and spend less money. But anyway, that's never going to happen. Apparently with either party. But I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail. But the thing that we're facing right now, I remember standing in a university in Siberia, and having these atheist students, and they would ask really tough questions. And some of the main things that they were asking were based on narratives that they had been raised with. That, belief in God is a crutch, and if you believe in God, it's because you're so weak that you're not strong enough to live life without some kind of a invisible friend called God. And they would ask questions like that. Or if God is so all powerful, then why do children die? Why? And it's the same questions always that I've dealt with my atheist friends. It's the same thing. Why does this happen? And there's a narrative that basically says God has abandoned you. There is no God. If God was real, he wouldn't let this happen. And I'm probably going to do a podcast about this, because I hesitate, because I've got many friends that I love dearly and I respect, who are Calvinists, and they believe that everything that happens is God's will. I do not believe that. I'll just come right out and say it. I do not believe that. And I can tell you that Jesus didn't act like he believed that, because when he saw evil, he confronted it as from the devil, not from God. And I mean, just I heard a man say, good theology. A guy that I work with, Greg Boyd. You may have read some of his books. Satan and the Problem of Evil is one of them. God at War is another one that I recommend. I don't agree with him on everything, but he made a statement, a very compelling statement. He said, Good theology looks like Jesus. So you look at the ministry of Jesus, you read the New Testament and how he approached and how he dealt with people who were sick, demon possessed. He treated that like the enemy, not like that was God's will. And anyway, not to get too in the theological weeds, but guys, this all goes back to Genesis chapter 3 where Satan himself spoke and presented a counter narrative. And guys, I've got friends that I grieve for. There was a person that I dated for a little bit that I really big red flag was I was attracted to her, and that always tells me there's something wrong with somebody. Seriously, a buddy. This is a rabbit worth chasing. I'm going to tell you guys. A friend of mine, he said, Gary, I have written a book, and I want you to know I have found I've found the answer why how to tell if a woman is crazy or evil in one easy step. And I'm like, man, I need to read that book. And he goes, oh, it's pretty short. I'll read it to you. In fact, it's just one paragraph. Really, it's not even a paragraph. It's one sentence. The the chapter one and the final chapter, it starts like this: How to tell if a woman is evil or mentally ill or crazy. And the answer was if Gary Ritchie's attracted to her. And I still hate him for saying that. But guys, I I've seen this truth is that and a lot of that goes back to things that I may do podcasts about that are a little too painful to talk about right now. But I've got friends that I'm grieved with, and one of them is a person that I dated, and it occurred to me after I knew something wasn't right, and I picked up on it because I've done a lot of soul searching and wondering, well, okay, why am I attracted to this certain kind of person, and why don't I why don't I open my eyes and be more awake in the process of dating or relationships, period. And I've started practicing that. And I knew there was something really spiritually off the first night I met this person, and I didn't say anything. I just kind of watched and learned. But this sweet person, beautiful, beautiful lady, so angry at God. Well, if, why does God let this happen? And she was arguing the same points that my communist friends in Russia did. And one day I tried to tell her it's like you couldn't talk when she got into that. There's a lot of anger there, and I understand anger. I've had it myself, and I was like, girl, you're mad at the wrong God. You have rejected God, and you've jettisoned Christianity, and and if I were you, I would agree with you that you have a moral obligation to reject that God, but you're rejecting the wrong God. You're rejecting a God that doesn't exist. You're rejecting a God of fabrication in your own mind of this evil Machiavellian God who's always doing these things, causing damage to children. And guys, there's millions of people out there that because of these story wars, these lies that are being said to them, they believe God does not love them. There is no God. And they're just being drawn into the same cesspool that I saw in the Soviet Union and less so in Poland because they were glad to get out from under the grip. But, in Czechoslovakia, Azerbaijan, all of these countries were just under such a grip of delusional darkness. And, and we're kind of falling under that. And I mean, I'm sorry if that, I hope it doesn't offend you, but if it does, I want you to examine what you believe. And because we should question everything, question assumptions of any narrative. And that includes the ones that we believe. I really didn't want to talk about this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. I was in a courtroom. I was asked to testify in a court case that involved a very, very serious injury at a church. and it's like, as far as testifying, that really shouldn't be a big deal. Uh, except that there was a whole lot of things said, even from the pulpit of this church, against this woman who was injured, like it was being faked. And there was lot of things that I even confronted the pastor. I said, "Man," uh, and where Jesus said, agree quickly with your adversary while you're still with him on the way, unless you'll be proven guilty and your everything will be taken away from you because you failed to reconcile with this person who was wronged. And of course, in his great spiritual wisdom, he rejected anything that I said. And I was like, well, man, love you, but I think this is wrong. Well, anyway, I got deposed. They came in and did depositions, and somehow I fell through the cracks of that deposition. And there was a narrative that I was watching that was being created about this woman. It was a false narrative. What God calls it is a lie. And I'm morally anchored in reality enough that I don't care if it's a church or a corporation. If you're lying, I will oppose that. And I don't care if it gets me fired. Yeah, I don't care what it costs me. I'm going to stand up. I'm just not wired that way. I'm not going to die a neutered little wimp that won't open his mouth and speak against evil. And it's really hard because there's a lot of people in this church I love, and I loved at the time, and I still love them today. Everyone that that was on the wrong side, absolutely on the side of a lie, I still love them. But I'm sitting there about to testify, and they put you, sequester you, and I knew some things about how they had prepared a lot of the witnesses, so I didn't know if anybody else would tell the truth of what really happened. But I was the first person to render aid on this person that was injured, and so I all I knew I had to do was tell the truth, not my truth, but the truth of what exactly happened. And so I had given a deposition, and I took the time to really study my deposition. What did I say? Did I speak correctly in that deposition? Yes. And so I didn't change one thing that because they're in courtrooms that if they can cross-examine you and get you to contradict your written deposition, they can use that against you. And I knew that. I'm not a lawyer, but some people have told me I should have been, but I study and I've negotiated contracts with corporations, so I understand enough to be dangerous. But that day I was just like praying, and it's like, God, I just want to tell the truth. That's all I want to do. Because when you're called in a witness in a big case, a jury trial, it's nerve-wracking because you're in this room and I'm like in a padded cell, and they let you out and you go and you stand or you sit down. You're sworn in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I said, yes, I do. So help me God. And the uh, the prosecuting attorney uh, asked me some questions about what happened, and I told the story of what happened, exactly what happened. And this happened, and this injury. I observed that there was something wrong. I treated the lady for shock, and just went through the story. And the defense attorney got up and got very combative with me off the bat, and was asking questions, and so I every time he asked a question, I quoted from the my deposition exactly what I said. I said, this is what I observed. This. And he tried to push me to say more, and I said, that's all I got to say. And then he got really embattled with me. It was a weird deal. It scared me a little bit. And he said, "Well, is there any reason why you would be the only witness in this courtroom that would tell the exact opposite story of what all these witnesses have said?" And I'm just a little dumb redneck truck driver, pilot, freight pilot dude. And at that time, I wasn't either. I was just a guy with a guitar singing at youth camps and revivals and stuff. And I just looked at him and said, "Well, it might be because they forgot to invite me to that meeting they had on April 19th at the church where they all had a meeting talking about this court case. I don't maybe I just missed the memo. I didn't get the and oh, you want to see a courtroom go into havoc? Just say that." And he was so combative with me that the judge, who was a she was a Democrat judge in Marshall, that I just love this lady. She was one of those judges that she gonna be in control of her courtroom, and she threw that gavel down, and she up counsel approached the bench, and I cannot. If children are watching, I'm not going to say what she, but I was sitting right there next to her, and I could hear her talking to him, and the words she used were just unbelievably harsh. And she said, she says, I'm telling you, you need to stop this crap, and whatever it is you're doing, this man's giving his testimony, so why don't you just shut the hell up, and because I'm about to kick you out of this courtroom. I mean, she chewed his butt out. And anyway, there was one other old deacon in that church that was privy to some knowledge that had a big bearing on that, and he had also testified and concurred with my testimony, and added some more information that I didn't wasn't even aware of, and that the defense or the defense lost the prosecution for wrongful injury, uh, that was a liability to the church. Anyway, they won the case, and I don't want to throw shade on anybody, because I know people have feelings and they get involved emotionally. But there's one thing that when you're in a courtroom and there's a judge, you're not able to just invent your own reality, because it's going to be cross-examined. And guys, I just want to end with this. Every single worldview, every single narrative that you have ever had in your life is going to get crash tested. Whether you're a Soviet communist or an American atheist, or you grew up Baptist and now you hate God, so you don't agree with him, you don't believe in him anymore. Every worldview, every conclusion you have, what you think you're building your life on, is going to get crash tested. And there's going to be a judge that you're going to stand before one day that will determine what is truth and what is a lie. And my advice is that we would all pray and realize that we're in a spiritual battle, guys. And the story wars are raging, and it's going to get worse because it is a political election year, and everything's going to. I mean, they're really going to try to start another race war, or they got some protests scheduled, to burn some cities down, and so they can go back to like it was in 2020. And I fully believe that there's going to be narratives to just try to get people to hate each other. And I'm just praying that people will be uh, peaceful, that people will be rational, and that people will reject lies. And guys, I love you. I know this was kind of a more intense crash test uncle episode, but just think about it and let me know in the comments what you think. There's a lot of narratives. Boy, we could talk about narratives. You might put in the comments some narratives that you want to talk about, because there's some doozies out there, guys. Love y'all. Y'all have a good one.